live from our studio at 24 Reed Avenue in St. Andrews. This is John Higgins Live. I'm Vicki Hogarth filling in for John tonight. My guests tonight are Jessie Davies and Freya Clark of the New Brunswick Nature Trust. Can you tell me a little bit about the Nature Trust of New Brunswick? How did it get started, and what are both of your roles in the organization?
Well, I'll start, Vicki. Nature Trust started in 1987, so we're 33 years old, and we have now over 60 preserves in the province. Actually, an interesting thing is that one of the main founders was from St. Andrews, Ken Langmaid. Some people will know where Langmaid Park is, and so that's really a local connection. We now are protecting 9,000 acres in the province, and it's growing. I'm a past president. I'm also now an honorary director, but also I'm still very much involved in fundraising and also as steward of Pagan Point. So I just find it the most exciting organization to work for. It just, to protect land in perpetuity feels pretty good.
And Freya, what is your role there, and what are some of the preserves around Charlotte County that people at home might know of?
Sure. So I am a stewardship technician with the Nature Trust. I started last year in June as a student, and I'm continuing on now into a full-time position, which is very exciting. So the stewardship department at the Nature Trust deals with protecting our existing nature preserves. So there are 16 of those actually in Charlotte County. But so I spend a lot of time working with our really excellent network of volunteers and stewards to help protect the social and ecological and historical integrity of our existing nature preserves. So I'll let Jessie start and tell us about the nature preserves in St. Andrews.
Well, I'll start. The closest one, but it's not the easiest one to get to, is Navy Island. And we have 61 acres of Navy Island. It's over half. And it's a wonderful place you have to get there by kayak or boat. But there are no red ants, which is very good for a place to walk near here. It's totally magic. On the other side, there are red sandstone cliffs. You can walk around the island very easily. It was partly purchased, partly donated. Michael and Sheila Cahy, or Washburn, donated a good deal of it. And the Williamson family donated a conservation easement as well on the island. So it's a really magic place, and Freya has a special thing to say about it.
Yeah, so this past summer on Navy Island, we rediscovered a Loyalist graveyard on the island. So that Navy Island was actually a special place for thousands of years for the Beskotomagatti people. It was at that point called Quowee, Kansas, for a special small birch bark wigwam on the island. And then after that, the first settlers to the area built on Navy Island, actually, rather than St. Andrews. And you can see evidence of that from old stone walls and foundations, and also from the graveyard. So this was really neat to find because it was covered in fallen trees, and the graves are sandstone from the beach, and they're all from members of the Maloney family, who were the first people to settle on Navy Island.
So where would that be on the island if you're looking at it from, say, the wharf?
Well, this year we did a lot of work on the pre-existing trail on the island. So when you go on the trail from the beginning, it's just to the right, just off the trail. and we're hopefully going to be working to clear some of the trees off of the graves this summer.
Wow. So, and I know you have an ambassador program with the Nature Trust. Is that something that volunteers would help work on?
Yes. So the ambassador program with the Nature Trust is a new initiative, and it allows people to learn skills that will help us protect our nature preserves. So there's a few different components that people can learn about. There's species tracking and species identification, which is kind of like scientific research and ID, so that when you walk in the woods, you can actually know the names of the things that are around you, which I think is wonderful. And then there's boundary monitoring, which allows stewards to help us monitor our property boundaries. And then there's trailblazer, which is what we call it, which is trail work. So people who were doing the trailblazer certification can actually come out to a day that we're having, not this Sunday, but next Sunday on Navy Island. We're going to be reestablishing a small section of the trail. And when you come out to that, you can also come and see the graveyard. Oh,
wow. Yeah. So that's next, not next weekend, but the weekend after?
Yes.
And you get there by kayak or your own boat?
Yeah, you have to have your own boat, or there are a few people who might be willing to lend a kayak or a canoe to an experienced sea kayaker. But in the summer, when it's a little calmer, we'll be able to have people coming over in canoes as well, and then often someone who doesn't have a boat can be paired with someone who has a canoe. But
so on that subject of trails, are there certain preserves that are great examples of trails that are part of Nature Trust, or do you just have a favorite preserve of your own?
I would start with Pagan Point, which is also right here in town, and it's right off the Van Horn Trail. So a lot of people go there, and there are people who go there maybe to walk their dog every day. That one was donated by Senator Michael Meehan and his wife Kelly, and also by Don and Rhodey Wellstead. And it's a wonderful place to walk. Let's see, that one is 30 acres, and it protects a salt marsh, and salt marshes are really, really important for biodiversity and biological production. So we're really very excited, and of course they're very important for migratory birds as well.
You were telling me before the show, Jessie, just how rare they are. Can you speak a little to that point?
Yes, well, around the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, we've lost about 70% of our salt marshes. And these are such important areas for primary production, for all sorts of things that we want to have in the ocean and on the shore. So they're exceedingly important habitat. And that one is also recognized by the federal government, and it was a conservation gift. And so it's a really important, although relatively small salt marsh, but I'm afraid we have to protect what we have. And as you know, the sea level is rising. If you didn't have the trail there and now houses, the best thing to do with the salt marsh would be to let it migrate inland. There are very few places that we're going to be allowed to do that because people have already built up. And as I mentioned, most of our salt marshes are gone. So they're pretty special when we have them.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the most important things, in your own opinion, that you do protect as an organization?
Well, there's a variety of things that nature preserves protect. But one of the important things is biodiversity and the diversity of plant and animal species that we have in our natural ecosystems in the province. So the Nature Trust protects areas that are ecologically significant. So areas where there might be species that are rare or endangered, and in a changing landscape with climate change, protecting areas for these species means that they can persist in a way that they wouldn't normally. Mm-hmm. And we also protect beautiful places and places with things like old growth forests or old forests, which are really important ecosystems in themselves that have communities of species that you won't find in other areas. And we also protect a lot of coastline. And coastline is really important. It's an area for migrating birds to stop over. It's very rich in nutrients. And it's got a lot of historical significance as well that would be lost if it was developed.
Can you speak a little bit to some of the rare species that are a part of some of the preserves that you have that you are protecting that people might be able to see if they come visit?
Well, one of the ones I would mention is the quahog on, well, everyone locally calls it San Juar's Pond, but it's called really the Cayetela Preserve. And I'll tell you a funny story about how that came about, because it took us, I was president then, I think it took us 8 to 10 years to actually get all of the pieces together. But some people here will know of Judge Caughey, who lived in St. Andrews, and he owned a good deal of property there. And he challenged his friend from Connecticut, Dr. Jean Sharp, he said, if you give your land, I'll donate mine. And so that was a really good thing. It took a while to get all of the legal things and all of it worked together. And then at the end, when all of it came together, we realized that it wasn't the 300 acres on the coastline that we thought we were going to get. It's all of the wonderful area and the marsh and Taggart Brook across the road as well. So it is 600 acres, and anyone who hasn't been there, go there. It has the most fabulous view of the Fundy, of the bay, and you just there and you just think we're the luckiest people in the world. We live here.
Can you tell me a little bit about, my coworker wanted to know about Beau Soleil in the St. Stephen area. What is that as a preserve, and are there bigger plans for it at this point in time?
Well, Beau Soleil was acquired from Pat Beau Soleil, I believe in 2016, and it is a fairly new nature preserve. It protects a few rare species, which is why it was so important. And it also has a section of the St. Croix River, which makes it also an important area to protect. But it's got lovely forest and beautiful view of the river, which makes it special. And it also has a path through the middle of it, and it's a good spot to go for a hike. But in terms of plans for it, at the moment, we're just protecting it and continuing to keep it the way that it is, because it's a beautiful place and it's good just the way it is. Yeah.
Now, we've spoken a little bit about donors and donations made of beautiful properties to the Nature Trust. Can you tell me a little bit about how someone who had land that they wanted to donate would get involved with you, and what kind of donations that you do have made to you?
Well, there are a lot of different options. Sometimes people just donate a property outright. Sometimes they will sell it to us. If it's something very special, we raise money from foundations and from private people to purchase it. Sometimes it's purchased at a lower price than the market price, and then the donor would get a tax credit for it, as well as, of course, if they donate the property. But we also have one property that has some wonderful orchids that is on a lease, and we also have conservation easements. And one end of Navy Island is that way. So that runs with the property in perpetuity. So it is protected in perpetuity, but we don't own it. And so sometimes donors would prefer to keep the ownership of the property, but they still get a very good tax credit for donating an easement on the property, and it also protects it in perpetuity, which is really important. And many people who have special places that they love really want them to stay as they are, They don't want to have development come in, and so it's something that works really well, and each donor is different. So if anyone wants to donate property or is interested, the thing to do would be to contact the Nature Trust, and we even have a brochure called Landowner Options. So there are a lot of different ways, and probably each of our preserves has a different history of not always a challenge like we have with the Kayatele Preserve, but various different kinds of things, and it should be something that works for the donor, but it also works for the Nature Trust, and particularly it works for nature and for the people of New Brunswick. Okay. So that's really the bottom line. And most people donate because they want this property protected. Of course, there are financial advantages to a donor as well, but it's usually because it's a very special place and they want it to stay that way.
Okay, so sometimes the donors are involved in levels of direction, let's say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we mentioned earlier before the program that each preserve has a management plan, and it's specifically tailored to reflect the donor's wishes, what it is really important biologically about that preserve that needs protection. And a lot of our preserves, people like to visit. And so we want them to visit in a safe way. Certainly during COVID, people find it really is, I suppose, psychologically and physically, you can get out and really have a wonderful experience safely. Mm-hmm. And so we've noticed many, many, many more people on all of our preserves all over the province, because it's an opportunity to go to the ones in your neighborhood, like some that I mentioned in St. Andrews, or there are 16 in Charlotte County and 60 altogether in the province. So that's a lot of places where people can get out and be next to nature. And you lived in Toronto, you know how important it is.
You were mentioning to me, Freya, that biologists are involved, especially when you acquire new land, to go in and see what's special and important about it. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so we will have people from our conservation department go out, and our acquisition department go out and do a baseline survey. And they will see what sorts of species we have in the area, if there's anything rare. They'll look at the age of the forest and the forest type, because that gives you an idea of the ecosystem that it encompasses. So once you have an idea of the quality, the ecological integrity of the area, you know how important it is as a place to protect.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I do want to speak to you about invasive species after the break. We will be going to break soon. If you're watching at home, you can call us at 529-8826 or toll free at 1-855-529-8826. And as well, if you're following on Facebook, you can also, if you are shy to call in, write your questions for Freya and Jessie in the comments section, and someone will bring them into us right here in the studio. We're going to go for a quick break though, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about invasive species. All right, I'll see you after the break. On John Higgins Live, I'm Vicki Hogarth, filling in for John tonight. If you want to call in for questions for our guests, Jessie Davies and Freya Clark from the Nature Trust of New Brunswick, call in at 529-8826 or toll free at 1-855-529-8826. Or if you're watching on Facebook, feel free to write your questions in the comments section and we will have them brought in here and we can ask you that way. But I do have a question for you. The ambassador program, species tracker is one of the ambassadors that is available at Nature Trust. Is that the invasive species component of how you can get involved?
No, there is an aspect that deals directly with the invasive species management. That's the restoration core.
Right.
So in each of these 4 things you can achieve certification, which as a young person is a really good thing to have on your resume because it shows that you have experience in these specific areas, which are very important for jobs in environmental science. But it also is very good for people who want to learn more about how to get rid of, in this case, they want to get rid of invasive species in their own backyard, because species like Japanese knotweed will jump a huge amount every year, and they can totally take over your backyard. And they're not attractive, and they're really nasty, and they're bad for the environment because they spread so quickly and they choke out our native species. So there are sort of 4 main ones that we encounter again and again at the Nature Trust, and the first one is Japanese knotweed. And to deal with Japanese knotweed, you can, in the spring, clear away all of the dead stalks. You can Google Japanese knotweed if you like. It looks kind of like bamboo. There's these woody stalks.
Okay.
And you cut it all down, and then you put a tarp over top the roots, and you leave the tarp for several years, and it will kill the knotweed so that it stops growing, and that's how you deal with that one. There's also Woodland Angelica, which is often mistaken for giant hogweed, which is something that concerns a lot of people. Yeah, because giant hogweed is it's a really nasty plant that will give you 2nd-degree burns. Woodland Angelica is not the same. It's much smaller, although it looks similar. And it actually also has a photochemical element.
Okay.
So when you're dealing with Woodland Angelica, you need to wear gloves, because if you get the sap on you and then you go out in the sun, you can get a rash. And it's not the same as hogweed. It won't burn you. It's not that nasty, but it can give you a nasty rash, which is not nice.
Okay.
But with that one, you just cut it all down and you put it in garbage bags and you let it break down in the garbage bags. And you just keep on top of it, keep cutting it, and eventually it will stop growing back.
Now, I was just told of a Facebook question that came in about giant hogweed. Do we have any in New Brunswick? How do you tell the difference?
We do.
It's big.
Very big.
Yeah. I think there was some in Bocabec along the highway, and not on our preserves. Is that correct? Yeah. But how to describe it? It's
very tall
and has a white flower head. Probably the best thing to do is to have someone, if they think they have it, go online and check it out, because you do want to stay away from it, and you want to be do what you can to get rid of it. It along the highway, I know there were some local people trying to get the province involved. I'm not sure that happened, but it is something that we don't want here. And all of these invasive species can just choke out, as Freya said, other plants that we do want. And in that case, it's very nasty for people to get. You can get blisters. It's really very nasty. Oh, yeah. So it's something but I would really just look it up. It's easier to do that way than for us to try to explain with our hands on television.
Is there an invasive species that is particularly of concern for New Brunswick or southwest New Brunswick? What would you say is the...
Japanese barberry is another one. Well, there's some in there are some in the ocean as well, but I think those are the ones. Hornbeam is another one that is coming in. Buckthorn. Buckthorn, and they are, and if everyone who knows St. Andrews knows that red ants are another invasive species, but I don't know that we are able to. We don't have a good way of coping with those, but that's where we have all sorts of good ants and good insects and things, and yet you have one that doesn't have a natural predator here, and that's why it becomes invasive. Okay. And certainly everyone here knows about red ants.
Now, I do want to talk a lot more about the ambassador program, but Jessie, you're a past president. Freya, what is your background? I know that you were just about to graduate university.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you studied and how your involvement with the Nature Trust has been sort of entwined with your education?
Yes, for sure. I did a Bachelor's of Science in Environment and Natural Resources at the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, and I'm graduating now with a minor in forestry. So when I got into the program, it was through forestry and through an amazing program for high school students called Envirathon, which is a competition-based program that gets you into environmental science. And I competed in forestry and I loved it. And then I read this book by Jamie Simpson called, I think, Travels Through Old Growth Acadian Forest. And it really changed my perspective on forests, and forests in the Maritimes in particular. I've always loved old forests. You can tell when you walk into a forest that it's an old forest. It's a different quality of sound, and it's amazing. It's such a quiet place, and it's such a special place. So I got into environmental science because I wanted to protect places like that are so important for people, but are also so important for species that only live in those places. So through that program in environmental science, I started volunteering with the Nature Trust, and I started doing that probably about 5 years ago. And I love what the Nature Trust is doing because they're protecting those places that I care about and that there aren't that many of anymore. And so when I got the chance to work for them, I just jumped on it because it's great. It's everything that I want to do, and it's, for me, working in something that feels like it's making a difference is so important. Mm-hmm. So.
And on that topic of young people, would you recommend it to people who are not just interested on a level of protecting nature, but also as maybe a career path? Did you find being a part of this organization opened a lot of doors for you?
Yes. Well, I definitely found that doing my degree opened my mind to the huge variety of environmental NGOs or non-governmental organizations. And there's also federal and provincial government paths that you can take in environmental science as well. But I would definitely recommend to young people who love the outdoors, love spending time outdoors, to go through and do a program if they want to, or even really just start volunteering with an NGO before you even think about going to school in it, because you'll see through that experience whether it's something that you will really enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. And it's great because you're helping protect those special places you love, and you're also learning more about what you might like to do for a job in the future. Mm-hmm.
Why does preserving nature play such a significant role in combating climate change, beyond just we think about like recycling and all these things that seem an afterthought compared to just starting with the root? But how do you explain that to people?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's a carbon sink. Forests, trees in particular, store carbon forests. The ocean stores carbon forests. So that's really important. I mean, to attack climate change, we have to do a lot of different things. We have to reduce the greenhouse gases that we are putting into the atmosphere, but we also have to store them. And so when you have areas that are being developed, if you're cutting down trees and so on, all of that releases more carbon dioxide to the environment. Whereas salt marshes, forests, some of these really important areas from a biological point of view are also really important for climate change. you want to add a bit to that?
Sure, yes, yes. So as I said before, the nature preserves also protect a network of rare and endangered species that in this changing climate and changing landscape would otherwise disappear. So they provide habitat in a way that's really essential as things continue to change.
Can we talk a little bit about that aspect of biodiversity and why sometimes the idea of just planting trees again makes people feel okay with the idea of deforestation, but how do you counter that?
Well, it has to do a lot with species diversity. If you have a plantation of one species, it produces, for instance, wood fiber, but it doesn't do all of the other kinds of things. And if we continue to have fewer and fewer species, they say at the end rats and cockroaches will probably win the day because they just survive anywhere. So in a way they are the invasive species of that world. And so what we really want to do is be able to have a great diversity. And when you think about pharmaceuticals, you think about things that we eat, we have so many things that we don't even know about all the species that we have now. So this is a treasure trove for us to delve into, and for human beings, but also for the natural environment. We have to work together, otherwise it's not going to work.
There's a question from Facebook.
Yes.
People are wondering, where would they find the preserves in Charlotte County? Is there a map online?
Yes, there is, and there are a number of them, but I think the best thing to do is to go online. They are described there, then you'd know how long the trails are. And one thing I would mention about the Samwars Pond or Caille Taylor is that you have to be careful of the tides. There is a tidal barrage there, and why Samwars Pond is so special is that it's saltwater infusion into a freshwater body. So that's very unusual. And there are species that thrive there, but also when the tide comes in, you can't get across. So there are trails on both sides, but if you intend to go across, you have to be careful with the tide there. And those rocks are very slippery, I know.
Yes, so if you go on to the Nature Trust of New Brunswick website, there's a tab that has our nature preserves. So you click on that and you go in there, it shows you a big map of all of the nature preserves in New Brunswick, and you can click on the icons for those and for the ones that are close to you, and you can read about them and you can see whether they have trails, and it'll also give you directions to the nature preserves.
Okay. Yeah. And when you're at the nature preserves, is there some information to be found on site to tell you about some of the things you might see?
Yes, it varies. I mean, for instance, even at Pagan Point in town here, there is a description of some of the things to look for while you're there. Certainly the same with the Caille Taylor Preserve. And of course, there's a trail map there. I mean, we don't have a trail map at Pagan Point, but it's not very long, so it's really not necessary. But some of the preserves you really want to know how far you're going to go and so on. So it's really good to learn about different ones. And a lot of people want to go to one that's fairly close to home, or maybe they have been to the ones that are closest and they want to have a new experience. And again, it's something that we can do now. It's safe.
Yes. What are some of the most underrated or maybe undiscovered preserves that you would recommend that might not be the most obvious to people?
I could tell you about Clark's Point. Clark's Point Nature Preserve is a nature preserve near St. Stephen, and it is particularly a really nice one to visit in the winter because it's got a great trail for skiing and snowshoeing. In the spring, when the water level rises, it can be impassable. There's a marsh there that you can really struggle to get through. But in the winter, it's beautiful. You have to park a little ways away from the beginning of the nature preserve, and you have to walk a little ways on a woods road or snowshoe or ski. But I went there this winter, and it's got old forest in it as well. And there was this one pine tree, and I was there with my sister and my brother-in-law, and it was so huge. It was this giant pine tree. So we tried to see if we could, both of us, put our arms around it and see if we could touch our hands together, and we couldn't. So that to me is a sign of a really cool forest. And so that one is lovely, and you can go all the way down to the river and look out, and it's got a beautiful view, and you can see America because it's the St. Croix River. Yes.
One we didn't mention that there are a number of them on Grand Manan, and there's one on Chocolate Cove on Deer Island, which is 73 acres. It's the Clark Gregory Preserve, and I think a lot of people like to have something in their neighborhood, so that that they don't have to make get in the car and drive a long ways in order to get there to a preserve. And we have a number of them on Grand Manan, and which is, some of them are just spectacular along the coast and so on. And I guess this is a time I could mention we're going to have a big announcement this summer. We've raised $1.4 million to purchase Ross Island. And we haven't officially announced it yet, but we have finished the fundraising as part of that, and that was really very good. And I have to say that a number of people in St. Andrews have been very generous in helping purchase that amazing, amazing property, and it has migratory birds, it has wetlands. It's a little bit like Minister's Island, although much bigger, that you either go there in a boat or you go at low tide.
Wow.
But it is very exciting, and I can't wait to get over there, so we've got to get...
This is breaking news.
Yes, yes.
That's very exciting to me. Yeah. That's what I normally do. Are there any species that are specific to one preserve, or a cool tree that you might recommend people seeing? Is there a place that you recommend going just to see something or waterfalls, something that's a unique site for this part of New Brunswick?
That is a good question. There are many nature preserves that we have that have all sorts of cool trees and cool animals and species. A really cool thing that a lot of people are into is bird watching. So we have several preserves that have really interesting communities of bird species. And while birding is not one of my specialties, it is something that I'm trying to do better at. But Navy Island is really good for bird watching. There's all sorts of interesting species there, some rare.
Okay, and then are there some nature preserves that are for more the adventurer that you would say there's a great trail? Did they appeal to different types of
I would
people?
say, just to pick up on the migratory birds, I would say South Wolf Island is amazing. So that is certainly something if one's in that area. And I was just looking at a list here of some of our islands. There's Dix Island, Fry Island, islands in Latang, New River Island. That's an amazing place to go, which is right across from New River Beach. It's sometimes called Barnes Island, I believe. And I've been there with Tony Diamond, who knows everything about all birds, and we would see lovely, just the most perfect bunches of down from the eider ducks, and not even a piece of grass in it. And when you go close to the nest, the duck will push the down over to keep the eggs warm and then waddles off. And so it's really fantastic to see that. That population is coming back. The predation by the black-backed gulls was very, very hard on that particular, and we used to see huge rafts of maybe 300 eider ducks at a time. We were excited this year to see 20 together. So but it's, their nesting grounds are protected there. I find that one really, really exciting. There's, on Grand Manan, there's the Thomas Monroe Memorial Shoreline 7 Days Work Cliff. How's about that for a name? The Meredith Houseworth Preserve, and then in the Western Islands, there just are a number of them, and these are places, because they're islands, that they're a bit naturally protected. But if someone, I've seen islands that used to be fantastic. One that I love very much in the Bahamas, it's a golf course. And nothing wrong with golf, but I think we need to have both things. So there are a lot of preserves in this area, and if you're a little more adventuresome, certainly to go island to island in a kayak is pretty magic.
It must be quite an emotional experience to see that you are saving the homes of so many animals and species. Do you feel the impact that you've made, and do you know how much area you are protecting? Do you have a number to put on that?
Well, we're protecting around 9,000 acres in the province now, but our goal is 15,000 by 2030. So we have a ways to go, but we are 2 years into our $10 million fundraising campaign, part of which was the $1.4 million for Ross Island, but there's a huge wetland in Majorville that we've just protected. And anytime you can protect, right on this St. John River, anytime you can protect wetlands, old growth forests, those really special and places where there's a lot of possibility of losing them. That's what's really exciting, and it makes you, somehow doing anything in life in perpetuity is pretty special.
All right, we're about to take a break. If you are at home, it would be a good time to call. If you want to call in with a question, they can get you ready to go for after the commercial break. The numbers are 529-8826 if you're calling locally. If you want to call toll free, 1-855-529-8826. You're watching John Higgins Live, and we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to John Higgins Live. I'm Vicki Hogarth, filling in for John tonight. We have a question for Jessie Davies and Freya Clark from the Nature Trust of New Brunswick that came in from Facebook while we were on commercial break. Kirsten is wondering, are there any sites or apps online that are good for identifying species of plants that I guess would be great to take with you while you're on a journey through a preserve?
Yes, I can tell you about iNaturalist, which is a really excellent plant ID app. It also works for identifying animals if you manage to get a good picture, or tracks, animal tracks. But so with iNaturalist, you make yourself an account, you can put it on your smartphone, and then you take it out into the woods with you. When you see a plant that you don't know, you take a picture of the plant. It's really great if you can get more than one picture from more than one angle, because that like multiplies the ability of the app to pick up on the characteristics of the plant. And the app will tell you what it thinks the plant is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so then you can identify your plant that way, and then experts from the province, well, actually from all over, who recognize the plant will comment on your post and tell you whether you are right or wrong with your identification. So it's really great. I use it all the time. Anytime you're out in the woods and you're curious about what a plant is, you can take a picture and it will tell you, and I just find that so exciting.
Wow. And you were mentioning on the break that you have another favorite preserve near Black's Harbor, something to do with lighthouses?
Yes, lighthouses. So I can tell you about the Connors Brothers Nature Preserve at P Point, which is located very near to the ferry for Grand Manan in Black's Harbor. And this is a preserve with a beautiful little trail that takes you along the coastline. And that area has an interesting history of lighthouse keeping. From the preserve, you can see one of the remaining old lighthouses that used to be in the area. There was a few on a few islands off of the coast, and then also on the mainland, because it was quite a treacherous area at one point for ships. So, and there was also a little farm that the lighthouse keeper had on the peninsula. So it's really neat. You can go and you can see the lighthouse that is still there, and it kind of gives you a bit of context for the history of the preserve.
Wow.
Yes.
I would just add to the iNaturalist that you can use it for, you know, if you're on the beach and you're looking at clamshells or mussel shells or those kinds of things. And it's great to have with kids because they can say, what's that? And if you don't know, or they can even, you know, at a certain age, they can take that picture and then find out what things are. And just the idea of being able to identify things that are nearby. So the next time they go out into a natural area, they'll have a much better understanding. And it's, you know, you can make a game of it too. So I think it's a really good thing, because one of the things that really makes me just thrilled with the Nature Trust, we have a fabulous staff, as one of what is here, but so many really informed, excited young people are taking over, looking after these places, and it's a long time commitment, of course, to take something on in perpetuity, and the idea that young people are excited about this and really understand their value, to me that's really important. So I'm really pleased with that.
Yeah, I can even go in a little bit more with the iNaturalist as part of citizen science, which is people who are interested in nature can contribute to scientific research in the province through things like iNaturalist. In the iNaturalist app, you can associate your pictures of things that you view with our nature preserves, and that gives us an idea. It's very helpful for our baseline studies of the plants and animal species on the preserve. And even at a larger level, there are scientists all over the country and all over the world who are using citizen science from apps like iNaturalist, including iNaturalist, to feed into their research. So you and your kids can be a part of scientific research in the country.
And speaking of that next generation, Freya's generation and generations after you, do you see that reflected in Nature Trust, that there are so many young people who care so much about the environment and understand its importance in everyone's longevity?
Yes, definitely.
I think so. I was going to add with Naturals, first of all, it's a free app, which is nice. And it also it immediately geographically locates wherever you get something. So my daughter sent me a picture from Halifax of birds that were near her wharf, and immediately it said exactly where it was and confirmed what our guess of what the birds were. So I think that's a really important kind of thing. I remember seeing some geese that I wasn't sure what they were, just along the where the trailer park is in town here. I popped that in and immediately got an answer of what species it was, and that makes me more interested in looking for more things and so on. So that's really good.
Yeah, well, to speak to young people and the Nature Trust as well, we often work with organizations like Nature NB to put out programs that involve kids. And one of the initiatives that we have right now is called Passport to Nature. And it is now with COVID, it is online. In the past, we've had a lot of in-person things, but we have very engaging series of webinars that are family-friendly. And so you can watch for your own knowledge, or you can also watch with your kids. We have really great things like how to ID animal tracks. That's a great one that's in collaboration with Nature NB. You can watch with your kids and then go out on a walk, and you can figure out what animals' tracks you're seeing. And we have a whole series of webinars. Our next upcoming one is in May. You can look up the exact date on our website, and that one is going to get into citizen science, so talking about things like iNaturalist. So,
and I do understand this summer you might have a cleanup event.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's in August, the 20th through the 22nd of August. Now, usually these are great community events where we all get out together, and it's planned in conjunction with Huntsman and Nature Conservancy, I think, and any group. Sunbury Shores has been involved, and the Nature Trust organizes it, and then everybody gets together for a big barbecue. That probably won't happen this year, but it's wonderful, and we would really love it, and I'm sure the community would, if every time you're on the beach, if you see bits, particularly of plastics, because they break down in the environment and then we ingest them, and so do our fish and everything. If you have a bag with you, or if you just pick up what you see on an ongoing basis, but particularly then, it's really wonderful. It is amazing what you can find. We have found mattresses. We have found, you can't believe, you think things are going to fall out of the sky with what you can find washing up on the shores. But also, I notice, I live on the water, and I notice people down there picking up garbage, and it's wonderful and it really, if we want our community, our whole coastline, we want people to pick up on the 20th through the 22nd of August, but anytime you're walking along the coast, if you can pick up things, it really helps.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of keeping the environment pure, I know spraying's obviously a big issue in New Brunswick for people, so I should mention that part of what you do would be to protect land from spraying as well.
Yes, none of our nature preserves have chemical sprays, and some of them, as has been quite well documented, are very concerning to both human beings and to the natural species. So it is wonderful to have areas where things are growing naturally. And in general, unless a tree goes across a trail, if it falls down, it goes back to feed the forest because it will rot where it is, because that's the natural process and the natural way of things happening. So yes, it's wonderful to have areas where we know there is not going to be any spraying.
You do have a campaign, Conserve Your NB, happening right now. Can you speak a little bit about what that is?
Yes, I'm very involved in that. It's very exciting. For us, it's really ambitious. We have just finished our second year. Our goal is $10 million, and we've got up to, I believe, just over $2 million. And we also want to preserve 15,000 acres in the province. And some of the $10 million will be in land donations, and most of it will be in cash. And of course, we have government help, and we have foundations and things, but we have a lot of people who just believe in what we're doing. And it's an opportunity for people to say, I really care about the natural world. It brings me joy. So people have been very generous, and we will continue that for another 8 years. But I'm just amazed at how well it's going, and some of the new areas that we will be announcing are pretty special places.
So people who do want to be a part of giving to your cause can find information on your website, whether it's giving a lot or a land donation or even a little.
Yes, if you go to the Nature Trust website, it's very easy to donate, and we use Canada Helps, so immediately in your email you get a receipt. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can also send checks to the Nature Trust. Some people are more comfortable with that, but in any case, you obviously will get a tax receipt and a really good feeling.
And again, for people who want to volunteer their time, how do they do that, Freya?
You can reach out to us through our website, through the Contact Us page. You can email us or call us, and we will put you in connection with the people who can pair you up with nature preserves in your region. We actually have volunteers who prefer to be a part of specific nature preserves that they feel attached to. We have some that like to volunteer on nature preserves in their area, and we have some that use volunteering with the Nature Trust as a way to go out and explore and help on nature preserves all across the province. And we call those people roving stewards, and they will come and help wherever they want to help, and they can focus on the things that they like to do best.
All right, well, thank you both for joining me tonight. I could talk to you longer. My guests have been Jessie Davies and Freya Clark from the Nature Trust of New Brunswick. I could talk to you for another hour, but we have to go. Thank you for joining me tonight on John Higgins Live. I'm Vicki Hogarth.